The bridge of the Red Scout cruiser smelled of recycled algae and old rain. Moisture recycling vents hummed a low, steady thrum, keeping the air thick and humid enough for the crew's comfort. Lieutenant Rissa stared at the main console, her wide, lidless eyes unblinking. Her species, the Vreeth of the Marsh Collective, had evolved in deadly predatory swamps. To blink was to die. Right now, her unblinking gaze was fixed on a single, pulsing point of light on the orbital map. It was a distress beacon. It had been transmitting for 3 months, a faint, steady rhythm sent by the last collective survey ship that had vanished near Earth's outer defense perimeter. Rissa tapped a webbed finger against the console, widening the sensor sweep. The beacon wasn't alone. "Contact," she hissed, her voice a wet rasp. The holographic display rendered a shadow against the deep void. It was too massive to be an orbital station, and far too still to be a ship. It simply hung there, a jagged, light-swallowing anomaly, blotting out the background stars. There were no engine flares, no comms chatter, just a dark, angular dreadnought. "Initiate deep structural scan," Rissa ordered. The cruiser's sensors pushed harder, pinging the massive silhouette. The data that returned made Rissa's blue-green skin feel suddenly dry. Hull composition, completely unknown. Mass readings contradicted standard physics, painting a picture of impossible density. And then there were the weapons. The telemetry translated the Dreadnought's kinetic launch bays, revealing a hybrid system of terrifying scale. "By the deep," the tactical officer murmured. The launch system was rated to fire projectiles at 0.99 C. A 1-kilogram object at 99% light speed carries roughly 5.6 times 10 Motokura, equivalent to 13 megatons of TNT. The special had thousands of them, silently waiting in the dark. Before Rissa could process the sheer scale of the destructive capability, the console shrieked. A harsh, dissonant alarm cut through the hum of the vents. "It's scanning us," a technician croaked. But it wasn't just a surface ping. The alien dreadnought was peeling them apart digitally. In a fraction of a second, the dark ship returned a data packet, a reciprocal echo of the scan. It was a perfect, atomic-level blueprint of the Wraith cruiser. The dreadnought had gathered more data about their ship in a microsecond than Rissa's deep scan had managed to pull from the dreadnought in 5 minutes. The tactical officer asked if the scan was malfunctioning. It was the only optimistic thing anyone said all shift. Then the wider tactical map began to update. Rissa watched, paralyzed, as the transponder signals of the 6 other Empire survey ships operating in the neighboring sectors simply vanished. One by one, there were no thermal blooms of explosions, no scattered debris fields detected by the long-range sensors. They were just gone, erased from the void. Nobody breathed. Not a decision, a reflex. The entire bridge crew held their breath at the same instant, as if exhaling might attract attention. The absolute silence of the bridge was shattered by a crackle of static over the open comms channel. A voice cut through the dark, speaking in a flat, mechanical translation. "Transmission received." No reply. Instantly, the massive, dark dreadnought on the sensors powered down its active systems, fading back into a completely undetectable shadow. It didn't fire. That was worse. Rissa sat frozen in her command chair. The edges of her skin were drying and flaking, her wide eyes filming over with a milky sheen of pure, unfiltered terror. On the console, the original distress beacon had finally stopped. In its place, her own ship's automated emergency system, triggered by the catastrophic loss of the other vessels, kicked on. Her ship was now the next beacon, pulsing softly into the dark, transmitting into the silence for whoever dared to come next. The hum of the moisture vents, usually a comforting reminder of the collective swampy homeworld, now sounded like a death rattle. Rissa's milky, filmed-over eyes remained locked on the main console. The dreadnought wasn't gone. It was just dark. "Lieutenant," the tactical officer whispered, his voice trembling so violently it barely registered over the comms. "It has no thermal signature, no electromagnetic bleed, no radiation. If we didn't have its exact coordinates from the microsecond it scanned us, it wouldn't exist. "Don't move," Rissa ordered, her voice a hollow rasp. The skin around her neck was flaking severely now, the dry air of terror overriding the ship's humidifiers. Nobody touched the helm. Nobody touched the active scanners. "But the other ships are gone," she snapped, though she kept her volume dangerously low, irrationally afraid that the void itself was listening. 6 collective cruisers, wiped from the map in the span of 3 heartbeats. No distress calls, no distress calls, no debris. Whatever that thing is, it erased them. She stared out the main viewport into the abyss of Earth's outer defense perimeter. For centuries, the Marsh Collective had believed humanity to be a primitive, fractured species. They hadn't left their home system in any measurable force. They hadn't built a galactic empire. The Collective Council had classified this sector as a low-threat observation zone. The Council were fools. Humans hadn't built an empire because they were busy building a cage, and Rissa's ship had just wandered right into the bars. "Lieutenant," the comms officer croaked, his webbed hand shaking as they hovered over his terminal. "The message we received, transmission received. No reply. It wasn't an automated broadcast." Rissa forced her stiff neck to turn. "Explain." The linguistics algorithm broke it down. The syntax, the micro-hesitations in the audio packet, the digital footprint. It was synthesized, yes, but it was triggered manually. Someone is on that ship, or at least an intelligence complex enough to mock us. A cold spike drove itself into Rissa's primary heart. They watched us scan them. They watched us realize what their kinetic weapons could do. And then they deleted 6 of our ships just to make a point. "What do we do?" the tactical officer asked, his eyes wide and unblinking, pleading for a way out. "We wait," Rissa said, the reality of their situation crushing the last of her hope. "Our distress beacon is active. We are the warning now. If we engage our sublight engines, we generate a thermal bloom. If we spool up the hyperdrive, we create a mass shadow. With kinetic weapons rated at ρ.99c, they wouldn't even need to calculate a firing arc. They would just pull the trigger, and we would cease to be before the light of our own explosion reached our eyes." Silence fell over the bridge again. It was a heavy, suffocating thing. Then the tactical console chimed. A single, quiet ping. The crew flinched. Rissa's breath caught in her throat. "Report," she demanded. The tactical officer swallowed hard, his skin paling to a sickly green. It's a navigational buoy. It just deployed from the dark mass. It's broadcasting on an open frequency. Play it." The bridge speakers crackled and a calm, synthetic human voice filled the room. It didn't sound angry. It didn't sound threatening. It sounded like a polite receptionist delivering a routine notice. "Warning, you have crossed the Helios Terminus boundary. You are currently trespassing in human-controlled space. Please power down all propulsion systems and await boarding. Compliance is mandatory. Have a pleasant day." Rissa looked at the tactical display. The Dreadnought was still completely dark, invisible to all sensors. But slowly, impossibly, the visual feed from the viewport began to shift. The stars in the distance were being blotted out. The Dreadnought wasn't just sitting there. It was moving toward them. "They're not going to kill us," Rissa whispered, a new, deeper kind of terror taking root in her chest. "They're going to take us." The tactical display didn't show the Dreadnought approaching. It only showed the localized gravity field warping around them. The Wreath cruiser shuddered, a deep structural groan vibrating up through the deck plating. "Main power is bleeding," the engineering officer choked out, his webbed hands flying across a dead console. "I'm not dropping the core, something is siphoning it. They're draining us remotely." The ambient hum of the moisture-recycling vents sputtered and died. The sudden absence of that sound was deafening. Without the humidifiers, the recycled air instantly felt stale and sharp. Rissa could feel the skin across her cheekbones cracking, a fine dust of dried scales settling onto her uniform. Her primary heart hammered a frantic, irregular rhythm against her ribs. But she couldn't tear her filmed-over eyes away from the viewport. The absolute blackness outside was expanding. It wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a horizon. There were no docking umbilicals extending toward them, no tractor beams glowing in the visible spectrum. Instead, a massive angular maw at the front of the Dreadnought simply irised open. There was no light inside. It was a sensory void, a cavernous throat of radar-absorbent geometry designed to swallow a cruiser whole without leaving a trace on anyone's scopes. Weapons? The tactical officer asked. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a plea for a quick death. If they fired a plasma battery now, perhaps the humans would respond with one of those 0.99C kinetic strikes. Better to be vaporized into fundamental particles than to disappear into that dark. Offline, engineering replied, his voice barely a whisper. Everything is offline. Life support is on auxiliary reserves. We're dead in the water. The Marsh Collective had mapped 1,000 star systems. They had categorized species by their technological noise radio waves, warp signatures, industrial pollutants. They had looked at Earth, saw a quiet system, and assumed it was empty or primitive. They hadn't understood that a predator doesn't make noise when it waits in the tall grass. Humanity hadn't failed to expand. They had simply weaponized their silence. They had built a wall of dark matter and cold iron, waiting for the galaxy to stumble into it. The cruiser jolted violently as the Dreadnought's internal gravity plating seized them. The viewport was entirely swallowed by the blackness of the human ship's interior. Then the massive doors behind them sealed shut, cutting off the distant starlight. The bridge plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the faint, sickly emergency lighting kicking on from the floor panels. "Lieutenant," the tactical officer wept, a dry, rasping sound. "What do we do?" Rissa didn't answer. She couldn't. Her wide, lidless eyes stared straight ahead into the gloom. Her skin was peeling, her body shutting down from the sheer paralyzing terror of the unknown. On the center console, a single amber light began to flash in the dark. It was the automated distress beacon. 3 months ago, a collective survey ship had wandered into this sector and vanished, leaving behind a beacon that Rissa's crew had followed. Now her cruiser was locked in the belly of a silent monster, stripped of power, waiting in the dark. "Nothing," Rissa finally whispered, her voice cracking in the dry air. She sat back in her command chair, perfectly still. The amber light on the console pulsed softly, casting long, rhythmic shadows across her ruined skin. Her ship was now the next beacon, transmitting its quiet, steady plea into the absolute silence of the void, patiently waiting for whoever dared to come next.